My name is Debbie Muckama. I'm the director of the Prisoner Reentry Institute at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our workshop on job readiness this morning. We have two of probably the most well-known national experts on the issue of employment of people with criminal records to speak with us this morning and to share their program models, and then we're going to open it up for discussion. As I said, I want to really quickly introduce my colleagues, Mindy Tarlow and Diane Williams. Between Diane and Mindy, we have over 30 years of program experience. So you're in for a real treat. These women both run very excellent job programs for people with criminal records, but are also on the cutting edge in terms of thinking about new ideas, pushing the field forward, and so you're really in for a treat to hear their kernels of wisdom. They're going to both make about 5 to 10 minute presentations, and then we're going to open it up and really have more of an interactive dialogue, so we make sure that we address the concerns that you have. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Diane.
So the real test is whether I can do three things at once. And I hold this mic, change these slides, and talk. We'll see. The Safer Foundation is a not-for-profit organization headquartered in Chicago, Illinois. We have been at this work since 1970, incorporated in 1972. So we work exclusively with the criminal justice population, and our primary focus in the work that we do is, in fact, helping people to be prepared for work, to go to work, and to remain attached to the workforce. In doing that work, we recognize that it is not just about getting the job. There's a lot of work that has to surround that. I would tell you that in the year 2000, 1995 was when I first got to SAFER. We served fewer than 2,000 people. By 2004, we were serving 4,000 people. And this year, we're on track to serve 14,000 people. Now, let me assure you that we're not funded to serve 14,000 people. So that's almost double what we're funded to serve. But people, because we've been doing this work for so long, people knock on our door when they're looking for help. I would tell you that people come to us in lots of different ways. If you look at this chart, it really just kind of tells you or identifies for us the different programs that we have, but by and large it basically indicates that people come to us sometimes while they're still in the institution, because there are some prisons in Illinois where we do our work. They may come to us through our adult transition centers because we run those on behalf of the state. In other terminology, they're called work release centers. They're fairly large centers, however. One is a 350-bed facility, the other one's a 200-bed facility. They may come to us post-release. They may come to us what I would call post-release. So they may come to us after, in fact, they have been off parole for some period of time. It could be 20 years. They lose their jobs, and they're at the same place they were 20 years before when they were looking for work. They're still facing an environment where there's a huge hesitation to hire people with criminal records. And so they may come to us at that point as well. On any given day, if you look at the programs that we have up and running, on any given day, we might be serving over 1,700 people. We believe that when we think about helping people to find employment, that we cannot do that standalone. First of all, we don't believe that any standalone intervention works. We believe it only works when you have the right set of services for that particular individual at the sort of right point in time and offer to that person at the right place. That's what works. And so we recognize that what we have to have is an integrated approach. We have to have an approach that addresses the needs of the folks that we serve, even though we may not directly provide all those services. That means that we have to work with other organizations. That means that we have to be involved in policy, because policy actually guides what can happen in terms of the services that we provide. It guides what gets funded. It guides really how people are treated throughout this process. And so we have to do that in partnership with lots of different organizations. This is the platform, if you will, that we use from an employment perspective. Our programs, each individual program may have other aspects to them, but this is the platform on which we build when we're talking about employment services. And so this is where I want to spend the next, or the rest of my presentation, quite frankly, is sort of walking through this. When people come to us, they go through what is called a group orientation initially. And that group orientation is intended to provide them with an overview of who we are, what we can do, and what we expect them to do. Because at the end of the day, what we know is that many people come to us, they expect us to have a job board. They expect to be able to pick a sheet of paper off that job board and go to work within the next 5 minutes. And we know that it doesn't work that way. So we want to make sure that we set expectations and level that thinking, which gives everybody a greater opportunity for success. They also go through an intake and assessment process. That intake and assessment process includes a number of standardized tests that look at interests and skills. Because the other thing we know is that when we talk about retention, retention starts at the beginning of the process, and it starts with first understanding what somebody really has an interest in and what they have a capability to do. Because if those things aren't right when you match them with a job, it's not likely to last very long. And so they go through that. There's also an interview that our staff conducts, and it's a customized sort of intake or interview process, getting at lots of aspects of the person's status at that point in time, in terms of family stability, in terms of whether or not there's a substance abuse issue, in terms of whether or not they are stable in their house, in their home life, and those other kinds of things, in an effort to make sure that we know how ready they are to go to work and what we need to do to help them get ready to go to work. Once they've gone through that process, they might go down one of three pathways. One pathway is to say that that person is in fact job ready now. That is, they have some level of education, they have some level of work experience, they have some direction that we can go in with them as it relates to helping them to find permanent unsubsidized employment. Many of our clients, however, are reading below a 6th grade reading level. Many of them have had no sort of above ground work experience, though they may have worked for a long time underground. And so what we know is that they, by and large, need some sort of an incubated work experience before we actually send them out into the sort of unsubsidized, somewhat unprotected environment. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because I know Mindy will talk a lot more about transitional employment. She's been doing that a lot longer than we have. I will tell you that we do it a little bit differently than a lot of organizations, because what we did was to establish a staffing company. And in establishing that staffing company, we priced that work just like any other staffing company would price it. So it's cost plus markup. And so when we do that, it also gives us some opportunity in some of those agreements to have, if you will, a surplus that we can then reinvest. So we have had one employer that was large enough that we actually had on-site case management, and we had on-site access to GED classes because we had enough money to be able to do that. The contract was large enough to be able to do that. And so that's really, for us, was the advantage of looking at it from a staffing company perspective. But the other advantage was that what it does for the employer is to say some of those things that you're concerned about in terms of liability, we'll take on. So they'll be our employee, not yours. They'll be at your work site. They will do all the work that you want them to do, but we will manage the HR aspects of it. That we will be the ones liable, if you will, for their behavior and those sorts of things. And so some of those employers that might have hesitated have signed up and have hired us through the staffing company. Ultimately, in some cases, those people become direct employees, but not always. But I would tell you that by and large, many of our clients need what we call the supportive services pathway. That is, they do need help with housing. They do need help with medical treatment, mental health treatment, with substance abuse treatment. They do need to go through other support mechanisms before they're really ready to even think about going to work. So we have, again, linkage agreements with other organizations so that we can help them access those services. And as they complete that process, they can come back into the work, one of the work pathways. What we have for people, once they're designated in one of these slots, is what we call retention services. And again, many people might call these folks case managers. We call them retention specialists because their job, again, is to help people get ready to go to work and to continue working once they have an opportunity to go to work. They do that through some one-on-one coaching. They do that through group coaching. We have a job readiness training program that will go up to 40 hours, but it is modularized so that we can give people, again, what they need based on how much experience they already have and where they are in their readiness level. And if we can skip, if you will, and go to the far right side of this particular diagram, what we have on that side is a separate, if you will, staff group from SAFER. That's the group that actually works with the employers to, if you will, to engage them in the process of hiring our clients. We find that we need two different kinds of people in doing this work. The folks that are doing the retention groups and working through the intake and assessment on the left side are far more likely to have a social work background. They are people that have a very good knack for working with people, helping them, if you will, to advance in their thinking, in their stability, and in their ability, quite frankly, to make good choices and good decisions going forward. On the right side, we have people who can interact with business people. So they understand the language of business, of the business environment. They have a sense of how people can be successful in their businesses, and they understand really the impact of having the right person in the right seat on the right bus in that employer's environment. And so they know how to go out and talk to the employer about what's going on in their business, what we can provide in terms of support, why it makes sense for that employer to hire through us, and all those other kinds of things. And in this middle part are both, if you will, a computer and a set of decisions that have to be made. So on the retention services side, the retention specialists are making a decision about when somebody's really ready to go to work and what kind of work experience, again, they may need to have, whether it's an incubated work experience or whether it's a job-ready scenario as they go through that. And there's a computer bank that's helping to match the employer needs, which we've probed pretty deeply, with the people that are now deemed ready to go to work. There are a lot of other things that I put in the presentation that I won't take you through because we don't really have time to do that, but I am going to have this presentation on our website within the next couple of days, which is just www.saferfoundation.org. And what it talks about are some of the tools that we use for that assessment and screening process, some of the tools that we use for our sector managers, which people might call job developers, to help them be focused, help them build strategies around who they're going to approach and how they're going to approach them, and some of the tools that we use in our job readiness component. I'll wind the presentation up just by saying that what we know, as Mindy often says, is that work works, and that is if you look at the recidivism rates for those released from the state of Illinois versus the recidivism rate for those clients who come to us, you can notice a significant difference between the two. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mindy Tarlow. I'm from CEO in New York City. It's always a pleasure to be on a panel with Diane. We have so much in common, not surprisingly, I guess, in terms of what we do and how we do it. But we don't get a whole lot of time to present together and learn from each other, so this is a really good experience for us as well. So I won't retread a lot of the ground that Diane covered. I think that we do some similar things in terms of how we bring people into the program, who we serve, how we assess them, how we manage their job readiness, etc. So what I want to do is quickly take you through the CEO model and then lift up a couple of things, particularly about job readiness, tools that we use, so that they can get your wheels turning and get your questions to bubble up. So the vision and mission of CEO is simply put that we do one thing for one group of people. We work only with people with criminal convictions, and we only manage their employment needs because we believe that everybody that wants a job should have the support they need to get one and to establish a meaningful connection to the labor market that can actually help them through the reentry process onto a career pathway. We do it in a comprehensive manner, again, not dissimilar to the SAFER idea of getting people as soon as we can, as close to release as possible. We put folks through a very brief job readiness training program. It's a classroom-based program where we do things like practice explaining convictions to an employer, helping folks get their work documents together, which I'm sure many of you know can be quite challenging for people coming out of prison, and simply just getting them grounded and ready to work. We follow that very quickly with enrollment in one of our paid transitional employment crews, which is a transitional jobs program where we pay folks every single day. We have a daily payroll operation at CEO. So what that means is within 1 week of coming to CEO, which is often very close to getting off the bus from prison, our clients have a paycheck in their hand after a first day's work. It's not a huge amount of money, obviously, but it really helps people transition home and get the daily things that they need to support themselves. Those transitional work crews are partnered with public sector agencies almost exclusively. Our state infrastructure has a lot of its infrastructure in the city, if you think about it. Highways, hospitals, courthouses, that sort of thing. What our work crews do is minor maintenance and repair work for those public sector agencies. In return, the public sector agencies actually pay for the work that we do. So while they are public sector partners, it's actually similar to SAFER in the sense, and I do think that this is a best practice, especially around trying to scale these kinds of operations, that we earn income from the agencies we're doing the work for. They're actually paying for it. They don't cover all of our costs, we wish they would, but it really does bring in a substantial amount of revenue to keep that work crew operation going. So not only does it help support our operation financially, but it also really helps support the worker because the client is paying for the work. That makes work real. There's a big difference between doing fake work and doing real work, and you know it when you see it. So yes, it does support the organization financially, but it also really supports the clients going through it. We use that experience to segue folks into a full-time, unsubsidized job. People work on work crews up to 4 days a week. They come back to CEO 1 day a week, where they either see a job coach who's helping them get what we call job start ready, or they're seeing a job developer who's working, as Diane said, in kind of a separate function with the full-time employer as their customer, brokering a relationship between our job seekers, who we now feel are job start ready, and the employers who can hire them full-time. That continues for everyone in transitional jobs until we place them in a full-time job, till they find their own job with our assistance, or they don't stay in a positive way and leave the program for some reason. They can always come back, but as I'm sure you know, especially if you've dealt with folks in substance abuse situations or other kinds of situations, you don't always succeed the first time out of the gate. So I would certainly encourage you not to expect that in any program that you design, that you have to build in responding to failure. Finally, we follow up for 1 year with a set of job retention services through job retention specialists, as Diane said. And we offer incentives for people who come in with their paychecks. We offer counseling, we offer child support advocacy, and a whole host of other services. We serve about 2,000 people a year. This year it's well over 3,000. Again, as Diane said, the demand is of course growing. We field upwards of 200 people every day across the city, and more recently in upstate counties in New York, as we try to replicate our model elsewhere. Even in the tough economic times we've had, we've placed over 1,200 people a year in full-time jobs, and 80% of our clients are enrolled in retention services. But again, just to highlight the Transitional Jobs program just for a moment, we really believe in the importance of immediate engagement, and a random assignment or controlled evaluation of CEO actually supported that the fact that we engage people so quickly in meaningful work is really helping to reduce recidivism rates after 3 years of being enrolled at CEO. We believe that most adults learn by doing, and the best way to learn how to work is to work. So what we do on our work sites, which are supervised by site supervisors on our staff, they are actually evaluating people every single day on how well they show up for work. I'm just going to, if Debbie, you don't mind, just pass out this Passport to Success. What we do with the Passport to Success, each client has a picture ID and a neck wallet that they carry with them at all times. In that neck wallet is now their Passport to Success. And what the Passport Success is designed to do is actually establish and evaluate 5 basic work skills, what we call the Center for Employment Opportunities Companies Principles of Success, CEO, CPs, your cooperation with supervisors, your effort at work, whether you are on time, your cooperation with others, and your personal presentation. And our site supervisors actually evaluate those things on a scale of 1 to 5 every day. And our clients carry their passport with them every day. and then they come back to see their job coach with their passports filled out so that they can talk about what's going well and what's not going well in their mastery of those basic work skills. So again, it's not 105 basic skills, right? It's 5 basic skills that are easy to quantify, easy to talk about, and easy to build skills. But you'll note that there are some very specific definitions of what these behaviors are. Even on time can take a while just to define. What does it mean to be on time? Rushing through the door for an 8 a.m. start? Probably not. Having your boots on and your passport's a success and you're ready to roll at 10 minutes to 8? That's probably a better definition of on time. Finally, we use that passport to success, among other things, to evaluate whether or not someone is job start ready. Are they available to work immediately? Do they have conflicts that are keeping them from working immediately? Evaluating their ability to interview well for a job, and you'll see in that sort of over on the right-hand side there, it says PTS rating acceptable. That's the passport to success. So we're using that tool to help establish people's job start readiness. And as I said, once they're job start ready, then they're able to work with a job developer who's working to get them that full-time job. And I think I'll actually stop there as well and give you all a chance to sort of digest what we've said and ask questions, and we can have more of an open dialogue about how we do what we do and any concerns and questions that you have as you enter this important phase of your work.
So some of my big takeaways are that we need, as we're thinking about the employment needs of people with criminal records, is we need the right set of services and support. We need the right assessment tools so that we can evaluate whether or not people are job ready. We need the right staff. Both Mindy and Diane talked about distinctions between staff who work with clients and staff who work more on the employer side. And we need the right collaborations, right? We know we can't do it alone. And so what kind of partnerships do we need to establish to make sure that we're really able to serve our clients well? So with that, I'm going to open it up. People have any questions for either Diane or Mindy? So the question is about, in terms of identifying and recruiting potential employers, what role does the federal bonding program and other kinds of incentives play?
In terms of helping them say, yes, we'll work.
Right. I think this fact is still true. I believe that CEO is the largest user of federal bonds in the country, bigger than states who use federal bonds. They are important for an employer who's on the fence and kind of worried about their institution and theft and things like that. So they are attractive to employers and they're very cost effective. I will say that they are more deal closers than deal openers. They're not going to get a door open, hey, look at me, I've got a federal bond to cover your insurance needs. And I actually think it's true about other incentives as well, financial incentives that employers can avail themselves of. I think the most important thing is the fact that you're an intermediary who's going to connect a job start ready person who's really good for that job opening for free with that employer. We use those kinds of incentives and federal bonds in particular to close the deal.
I agree that we use them to close the deal, but I'll throw in the concept of the work opportunity tax credit as well, because people use that in the same way. They use that as a deal closer as well, and I always laugh about this. If you are in a room full of employers and you're talking about hiring people with criminal records, none of them care about the work opportunity tax credit. But the minute you walk out of the room and talk to them one-on-one, they all care about the work opportunity tax credit, particularly if they're going to be hiring a number of people as opposed to one. We just held our annual employer recognition event last Friday, where we serve them a nice lunch and they bring one of the clients that they've hired from us, and some of them tell stories about the people they've hired from us and that sort of thing, and they get awards and all of that. But they were really excited because we had somebody there from the Illinois Department of Employment Security, which is our labor division, as well as having had somebody from the U.S. Department of Labor that they could talk to about how to more easily process those work opportunity tax credit and to make sure that they could, that what they wanted to do and what we're trying to help them to do is to pre-qualify people before we even send some of them out, because some of them care even more than others. And so we're trying to make sure that it's as easy for them to hire our clients as it possibly can be. And so we're trying to work through that with them. But again, people who are going to hire multiples are also, in addition to being interested in the bonding, are very interested in the work opportunity tax credit.
Now, is the work opportunity tax credit a cumbersome thing to take advantage of?
But for us in Illinois, it's really the processing time and what's expected. And here's what the employers say. They are concerned that the Department of Employment Securities requires them to do what they believe is the Labor Department's work. And that is, first of all, it has to be verified that the person that we're sending to them is within that period of time that's allowable for the tax credit. People who have been released for over a year cannot be a part of the tax credit process.
If you're released over a year?
That's all. I think that's state by state.
Okay, in our state. Mindy's saying that it's state by state. And so, at any rate, in our state, that's true. And the other part of it is, if the paperwork is not actually processed within a certain period of time of them being hired, they also become ineligible. Well, because of the unemployment status in this country, the Department of Employment Securities is overloaded with processing those and aren't processing the work opportunity tax credits. And so what we're trying to do is to do as much of that for them as we can, so that it's so easy for the Department of Employment Securities, when they get the paperwork, that they'll go right through it. And I think we're at a point of having agreement around that. Here's another hint too. One of the things that we all tend to struggle with is verifying the employment of people once we place them. Sometimes they change jobs, sometimes they move, and for a number of reasons they're difficult. But your local labor department can also help you with that, because they, by the quarter, look at who's employed and how much they're making in that quarter. Once we got access to that information, our retention rates skyrocketed, because we could only count those we could actually touch. But once we started getting that information from our local labor department, our retention rate skyrocketed.
Just want to make one point about the work opportunity tax credits. A number of states, at least 5, and I know a couple of municipalities, have their own versions of tax credits that are specifically for people with criminal records. I know Philadelphia has one, the state of Illinois, Louisiana. I know there's some folks from Louisiana here. If you look at the National Hire Network, which is a nonprofit organization that specializes in the employment of people with criminal records, they have a number of fact sheets, a whole section on employer resources, and in there it describes the work opportunity tax credit in detail, and also those states and the eligibility requirements for those states. So it's something you might want to check out as well. Any other questions? Sean?
Can you talk a little bit more about setting the expectations early? Because I'm taking that away, because I think that's crucial.
Okay, so the question is about setting expectations early among clients.
Yeah, thank you for the question, John. It's interesting because people do have often a real need and an urgent need to go to work. And so what they really want to do when they walk in the door is to have us walk them through a list of open jobs and to send them out on interviews that day. And unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, because then you don't know whether it's a good match. Then you don't have a sense of where that person is, or whether they even have housing or anything else that will allow them to move forward in the work arena. And so, excuse me, and so what we do is we walk them through really some of the concepts for what makes the best match and how we can be most successful in helping them. And then we walk them through the various people in our organization that they're going to encounter during their time with SAFER, and what they can expect those people to be able to help them with. But we also tell them what they cannot expect to get from that staff. And so and then we give them the opportunity to decide whether they want to do this or not do this. So that's all before we get to intake.
So it's pre-intake.
That's exactly
right.
right.
You do it in your group orientation.
That's right. It's pre-intake and it's a group orientation, because we just, again, want to set those expectations. It's kind of like when you're managing people, or for me anyway, if somebody comes to me with a plan and we agree on the plan, then we both know what to expect for the process. I don't feel the need to talk to them every day. I don't, to check it and that kind of thing. But if there is no plan, then I'm going to walk down the street with one set of expectations, and they're going to probably have another one. So this is to mitigate that.
Yeah, and I think there's a balance between managing expectations and managing motivation. So what we try to do is meet people where they are, have a clear conversation about where we want to go, but here's where we are right now, and we really need to start working right now. And most people, when they come to us, the thing they're most motivated by is not going back. So we take advantage of that opportunity, and especially because we're in a position to essentially guarantee each person a job in our transitional employment program. We just try to say, this is where we are now together, and let's do this, and let's do a great job. And as Diane suggested, we actually have a contract with our participants. This is what we're going to do, and this is what you're going to do. So it's very clear up front, and then we work together through a process. But I think it's an excellent point, because I think especially for line staff who are managing folks one-on-one, there is a balance between keeping people really motivated to be there and managing their expectations carefully about the kind of job they can get, the kind of wages they can get, wanting it right this second, and the rest of it.
Can I just say one other thing? I think it's also important that you have to educate the referral source too, because sometimes parole officers have expectations that if they refer them to you, that they're going to be employed immediately. So I think that going forward, I know I'm going to have to make sure that they know what the expectations are too.
It's an excellent point.
And in relation to the process, when they come into your organization and you assess them, what is the time frame from assessment to actually having them employed? And what is the process once they are assessed, and if you determine that they are not job ready at that point? What is the process from that point?
So the question is about assessment and sort of the time frame from being assessed to when folks are actually getting employed, and then for those who are not job ready, what's the process?
Because I'm just kind of thinking a lot of the men and women that we work with lately have been long-termers, done quite a bit of time in prison.
So for
for
particularly,
me, you're not ready.
That's right.
And so how do you gauge that?
So I'll give a very quick response and then turn it over to Diane. In our situation, people are working in transitional jobs, whether their jobs start ready or not, and we're using that experience to build their job start readiness. Again, with the philosophy being that people are going to learn how to work by working, and working in an environment where somebody is actually evaluating the most basic work skills, because you're quite right. I mean, there are people who are coming home after many years and also who have no work experience, or if they did, it's long gone, and it takes a while to kind of ramp back up to just getting up to an alarm clock, getting where you need to go, having the right attitude, getting through the day. So we use the transitional jobs experience to make people job start ready. So there are some who are job start ready right away, and there are some who are job start ready, 2, 3, 4 months down the road.
We don't have transitional jobs for everybody, but the concepts are basically the same. And I have to tell you, I have not looked at that probably in the last year, but I would tell you that when I did look at it, by and large, the people that were in the job ready category, it was a 2 to 4 week time frame between their coming to us and their actually having employment. I would tell you that what we found in our incubated work experiences or the transitional jobs is that people can need up to a year in a transitional job. I mean, we have always thought about it in a 90 to 120 day time frame, but there are a lot of people, to Mindy's point, and to your point, who have been away for a long time, who have so many other things that they have to stabilize in their lives, that it's quite a while before they're really ready. We also find that people get very comfortable in that incubated work experience and don't want to leave it. Don't want to go out and interview for the next job, even though the next job might offer them more money and better benefits. They don't want to go through the rejection again. They don't want to take the risk of of the next job not working. And so we do also have some difficulty getting people to leave the transitional job experience and to move into the next one. And so we're doing a lot of work around that. We're doing some upfront work, so before they get the transitional job, we're trying to set the mind around it being transitional.
Just to underscore that point, because you know, in the work that we do and in life in general, your blessings are also your curses, or your strengths are also your weaknesses. And so while the Transitional Jobs Program is a very powerful thing and a very powerful engine that runs CEO, Diane's absolutely right that it can be hard to get people out of transitional jobs. And in our case, what makes that sometimes even more challenging is that our work that we do on the transitional job sites is in crews. So you're working with your peers, you're working with other folks who have the same experience as you do, and those of you in the correctional system know that for many states, it's actually a violation of parole to fraternize with other people on parole, except working, being in programs. So it's a really big opportunity for a peer-to-peer support program, but it does sometimes have the tendency to create a comfortable environment that makes it harder for people to move on from.
Can I make a comment? I want to go back to Sean's point for just a minute about parole and setting the expectations with parole. And let me just tell you, that is really critical. What we discovered, and this is interesting because I didn't know this, I don't know if this was always going on or if it's a relatively recent phenomenon, but we discovered that parole was requiring those people who paroled out of work release to be home for at least 72 hours, and in some cases up to 2 weeks. Now these are people who had jobs. And so for 3 days to 2 weeks, they couldn't go to work because if they did, they were in violation of parole and could be revocated. And they wouldn't be sent back to us, they'd be sent back to an institution somewhere downstate Illinois. The employer would have no employee, and this person would have no job and no freedom. And so we're now working through how we can do that differently. And the good news is our director and our head of parole are both open to working through that. But we do host open houses for parole because there's sometimes new parole officers. We try to have regular meetings with them to give them updates as to how things are going. And in some of our programs, we've even advanced to joint staffings so that SAFER, other not-for-profits working with that particular individual, and parole are in the staffing for that person so that we all, again, are setting expectations and all have a sense of what we're going to be doing moving forward.
That's a really good point. I remember once one employee of mine was on parole and his job was to be the receptionist and had to report to parole in the middle of the day. Right when I needed him to be doing his job duties, essential job duties were basically to answer the phone. And in my case, I was willing to sort of advocate with the parole officer and indicate, but most other employers probably wouldn't have done that step. They would have just said, you know what, it's not worth it for this guy, gone. So it really is a very important point. I think you had a question, John?
Yeah, you kind of answered it right there when you said you had an employee that was on parole. I wanted to know, are agencies using ex-offenders in this employment search as sort of like example?
Do we hire?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
And if so, what are they involved in the recruitment of employers in the hiring process? Or they say like, here, look at me, I'm a great example. I know in Ohio we're going through a lot of media balance fights with ex-offender. The city of Cleveland has hired, and the news is bashing the city and it's making the program look pretty bad. If you don't know anything about reentry, they're pasting people's pictures on the 11 o'clock news. Look who works at the city, so forth and so on. And if you could just speak to that a little bit. And also, I'm not very familiar, but was just learning about the federal bonding and a coalition group that I left on Monday. In Ohio, they were speaking about federal bonding, and they were very upset because the number was low of how many people actually took advantage of that. And our number was 30. 30 people have taken advantage of the federal bond, and I want to know, were you guys numbers higher, and how can you promote that with employees?
Right. Is everybody here familiar with what the federal bonding program is? Which is,
I see some notes.
yeah, so it's a program that was started by the U.S. Department of Labor a number of years ago to try to provide bonding insurance to employers who hired at-risk individuals. So not just people with criminal records, but other people who would otherwise have a hard time getting bonding insurance. Originally, it was funded by the U.S. Department of Labor, and you could apply to the U.S. Department of Labor to get a bond. It covers $5,000 of bonding insurance for a period of 6 months, can be renewed, so if you needed to get another 6 months and get another $5,000. In addition, I believe, and my colleagues here can probably correct me if I'm wrong, I think you can get a double bond, so if you needed $10,000 worth of insurance, you can do that. I can tell you, as someone who hired someone who had a person with a criminal record, I had to actually avail myself of the bond. We had an unfortunate incident where the person actually came and stole some computer equipment. Very easy to, it's a process that actually works. So we had the money restored to us, and it was a beautiful thing. I mean, it wasn't beautiful that the incident happened, but I just can say that it actually works. I do believe that now most of the bonds are run through state departments of labor, but in cases of large nonprofits who are using lots of bonds, they purchase them themselves through the U.S. Department of Labor.
We don't have to.
Okay.
It really is state specific. It really is state specific. So in our state, our labor department will still buy them for us.
Okay.
if we want to use them.
How much are they?
But excuse me, we don't pay for them, so we don't have a price to give.
I think it's $100.
She said $100.
And you can get them in packs of 100, and they're cheaper. It's quite cost effective. We actually pay for it out of our parole contract, and it's really not a lot of money, and you can get them in packs. And I believe we use about 250 a year, I think. But again, as I said before, we're one of the largest users.
Can I do a marketing reason for using them?
Yeah.
Ooh, I have control. Who gets to talk?
I was going to
I
talk
also have
about
a big
mouth.
Just as an FYI, I mean, there are a couple of reasons that employers would like to have those, and I think maybe understanding that is really helpful too. And one of those is that in a lot of cases, when you hire somebody with a criminal record, they are not immediately insurable under that company's umbrella policy or liability policy. So this is to offer, if you will, an incentive for them to go ahead with that hiring if they're the right candidate, because they will still have coverage for that person. But it is limited coverage.
It's only for theft.
It's only for theft. And so you need to know that it's not, if there's any other kind of incident that happens in the workplace, it won't cover that.
That's right.
It's just for theft.
Which goes right to your point.
Yeah, my point was going to be, one of the reasons why many employers indicate that they will not hire our clients is that they're fearful of negligent hiring, which is basically liability that they incur if an employee does something on the job, like hurt someone, then the employer is held liable for the actions of the employee. So federal bonding, while a very important resource, and both Mindy and Diane earlier mentioned that it's very important as a deal closer, often when you're trying to recruit an employer, it does not necessarily help with fixing that fear of negligent hiring, which is really more of a question about foreseeability. Was it foreseeable that this person was going to commit a crime on the job? That gets to questions of background checks and needing to review and make appropriate matching and decisions that very qualified job developers will do to make sure that an individual who's applying for a job really is qualified for that job.
And so to address your other point, we of course hire people with criminal records as full-time staff at CEO. I think it's probably about a third of our staff, and only about half of those came through CEO at one point. We do not hire people as full-time staff when they first come to CEO. We have a policy that folks need to go out, have a job in the private sector, and for several months or a year, and then we would consider hiring them because we think it's important to get that real world experience. Right now, I would say they're mostly in our case management functions and job coaching and job retention functions. I'm not sure right now if any of our job developers who are dealing with the business community have records, and that's not by design. It's just sort of how it's shaken out. And we do try to use our clients as success stories, certainly in our annual reports, and when we have public appearances. We just opened an office in Albany, and Sean was there, and certainly we had a client speak, to put a real positive face on the issue, but it is a challenge, as you've seen in your own town, that it can be a difficult story to convey positively, and it's always got some, potential to go wrong, depending on the angle of the reporter or what's happening in your community.
And Mindy, where are you from?
New York.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't add a lot to that, except that we do have people with criminal records who are sector managers as well, who are going out and talking to the businesses and helping them to work through that. Here's the question.
I'm hearing what you're saying, and all this sounds really great and wonderful.
Mhm.
But when I'm thinking about where I am in California, with what's going on with the Department of Corrections in California and the mass releases that they're doing, and the number of people that even return to my county, Fresno County, we're talking about in some of the 750 parolees a month. This is a huge undertaking. And when the mindset of the public is that we don't want to employ these people, half of them are living under the bridge because they have nowhere to go. I'm just even trying to figure out where do we even begin.
Yeah, California is probably the hardest example
And
because
I'm
you
from
have.
Los Angeles.
Okay.
And Fresno is really
Fresno.
different.
Yeah,
Because
Fresno's tough.
I actually know Fresno. I mean,
Yeah.
So you've got the largest state prison population.
Yes,
The, your economy is particularly bad.
Yeah.
So what can
And your
what's,
housing is
what's
particularly
reasonable?
expensive.
What are some practical strategies that
Something
these folks
practical
can really
that we
do?
can take.
Exactly.
Right, and we've been spending a fair amount of time in California recently. I've been to Fresno, and we're trying to start a pilot project in the Bay Area and looking at other high-impact counties around the state that we think could take advantage of our services. And yes, it's a huge challenge. I mean, I've done this work for half my life on Earth, and I'm still shocked by the numbers of people who come home onto parole in California. So what we're trying to do is kind of chunk the work, if you will, go county by county and try to make it so overwhelming. And we have had some success, at least with this Bay Area project, because we were able to work through a partner, RedF, in California, to work with the state Department of Transportation, Caltrans, and become part of their litter abatement project. So to try to get the transitional jobs, as I was saying before, and it's no truer in California than any place else, right? I think I might have said that the opposite. It's truer in California than any place else, that people need to work and there's fewer and fewer jobs. So again, I think the transitional job opportunities, if you can create them, could actually be a really important ingredient, not the be-all and end-all, but an ingredient to help folks get through, what's a very difficult time. And I think that stimulus dollars and other kind of private dollars that are looking to stimulate the economy, I think there's some room there, and perhaps I'm being overly optimistic, but I really do believe that there's a focus on California because of how difficult things are there, and that there are people who want to help.
And I don't have a lot to add because I too would think about the stimulus dollars and those kinds of things. Look at the green jobs industries. I mean, the federal legislation actually names this population as eligible for those sorts of opportunities. And so there are stimulus dollars that are funding training for green jobs, and then so that they can ultimately be placed in those jobs. And they're going to pay pretty well over time, quite frankly. And so I would add to look at that. And then the other thing, and this is always something that I always hoped to be bigger and better at this, and we haven't gotten there. But take a look at Pioneer Human Services and what they do around social enterprises. Pioneer Human Services. They're actually out of Seattle, Washington.
Washington State, yeah.
And but I want to say they're a $50-60 million a year operation, and the great majority of their money is earned income. Because what they have done is they do things like they manage the Starbucks cafeteria. And of course, they're employing their clients to do that. They have a contract with Boeing to do part of the assembly work for some of their machinery. And of course, again, they're using their clients to do that work. And so, I mean, I don't know how much of that is available in Fresno. What I knew about Fresno was like King's something
King
Community College.
Kings County Community College?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually went to a basketball game there.
Yeah.
But anyway, because my nephew played in it. But at any rate, it is a time that we have to be very creative in how we approach this.
One good resource in California, just not to be too regional, is The National Employment Law Project, there's a lawyer, Maurice Emslem, who's done a lot of work in terms of working with some of the cities around some of the hiring policies, so doing a lot of work around ban the box and stuff. He's based out of Oakland. If you look at the National Employment Law Project's website, you can find Maurice Emslem. So, additional questions? Emslem, E-M-S-E-L-L-E-M. I just want to say too is that the three of us chair the Education and Employment Subcommittee for the National Reentry Resource Center, and so very soon a lot of the information that we've talked about here today and some of the resources that we've identified and haven't yet identified are going to be on the website on various different pages, including frequently asked questions and at a glance. So I really encourage you to also check back in on the National Reentry Resource website, and also to feed us questions that you think we're not yet addressing, and we make sure that we make those resources really helpful to you.
You want to give our vote?
Sure. Additional questions? Yes.
Is the funding for your transitional jobs, is that coming from a workforce development grant, or are you utilizing it from some other line item?
Well, what I was said before, and I'm really glad you asked because this is important, that most of our transitional jobs revenue is earned income. So if I do work for the state highways on behalf of the State Division of Parole, I do the work, parole pays me, and transportation reimburses parole. So they're actually paying a daily rate for our work crews. So sort of like the social enterprise that Diane was just referring to with Pioneer, this actually generates a lot of revenue. It doesn't cover all of our costs, but it does provide the vast majority of the funding we need to run transitional jobs. The rest of our operation, job placement, job development, job retention, comes from those more traditional government sources in workforce development and in criminal justice, and also from the kinds of foundations that support those efforts. More recently, though, we've been able to secure some federal stimulus dollars, not through the workforce stream, interestingly, but through the criminal justice stream, the federal burn money that was also used as part of the stimulus effort. We were able to secure some stimulus dollars to help both preserve our transitional jobs in New York City, because as you can imagine, people were starting to cut back as their own budgets were getting cut, but it also allowed us to start expanding to some counties in upstate New York like Albany and Buffalo and Rochester, and try to get something going in California. So that's been a really important piece during this really tough time, is to get some stimulus resources to help both create and preserve the transitional jobs capacity.
And how much of a tax credit does this work opportunity provide the employer?
Is it $2,400?
It is
I think it's $2,400.
Because they have to work a
They have to
certain
work a certain
time.
number of hours, and that's in the private sector. I'm not.
Right, it
It's
has to
not.
be in the
It's not.
private sector.
It's not a public sector
And does
opportunity.
that revenue increase when they have multiple ex-offenders on their?
I believe it's per person.
Per
It's per
person.
person.
Okay.
And one, just back to your question about that, the one thing that I would encourage you to do if you're going to try to promote tax credits with employers is say that you'll do all the paperwork.
Yeah.
Right, that's what we.
That's
They don't wanna
really
do- all they
that's
wanna
really
do is-
important.
All they want to do is open their.
Sign,
And why shouldn't they? You know.
they should just need to sign a form,
Yeah.
in fact.
Now, I don't know if I'm off base and if you can even answer this question for me, but we encounter quite a few who return to the community after incarceration that have viable businesses prior to their incarceration. Are there resources out there that can be used to assist them in maybe restarting their business?
We actually wrote a report on that topic called Venturing Beyond the Gates, which is all about how can entrepreneurship and self-employment be a successful strategy to facilitate successful reentry. And there are a number of programs out there who either work with individuals inside prison to help them start develop business plans and then help them when they're outside, or assist people once they get home to develop their business plans, get some startup funding, and assist them along their way. In that report, we identify a number of those programs with contact information and everything else with profiles. So I encourage you to look at that. I will say this. the micro enterprise field is very eager to work with us. They are not afraid of working with people with criminal records. They have a history of working with many individuals who have barriers to employment, immigrants, people with disabilities, women with children.
How did you build that relationship?
Yeah.
That one right there.
The one with micro.
Yeah.
We looked and we tried to just find the organizations that there's big trade organizations. So AEO is one of the trade organizations. Axion is another big trade organization. And many of them have local affiliates, so they may have in your community or in your state an organization, like a local organization that gives out these small microenterprise loans, and they run classes, like usually a 10-week or 14-week class in business plan development, and then assist folks along the way in, the kinds of services that they need to actually start a business and have it flourish. I will say this, the correction side of things, usually parole, probation, is not often comfortable having someone who's just come home from prison start their own business. They can't see the paycheck, right, on a regular basis, so they're not, starting your own business is very risky. If you look at the number of businesses that start in this country, most of them actually probably don't flourish.
65% fail in the first year.
Right. So, but what the recommendation we made in our report is that folks may not be ready to start a business. They may be doing what's called income patching, which is that they're working while at the same time thinking about starting their own business and working towards that. So I encourage you to look at that report if you can. It's easily downloadable on our website. I'm at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and if you just do a search for Venturing Beyond the Gates, it does, as I say, highlight and provide contact information for many of these very successful programs that, again, we're working inside prison, but then more importantly, working with folks when they come home. And that is actually, while it probably represents a very small sample of the individuals coming home from prison and their interests and their abilities to probably start their own businesses, it is, again, a viable partner. I was very, very, very surprised and excited by the enthusiasm with which that community of folks wanted to really work with our clients.
One of the things that we do is that on our mentee applications for the ex-offenders, we ask if they're veterans.
Right.
And then if they are veterans, we tap into the services that the veterans have for entrepreneurial services.
Yep.
That helps to, move their ideas for self-employment.
That's great.
Just to make sure everybody heard him, and so did our recorder. Tell me your name.
My name is Jonathan Backers.
Jonathan was sharing with us the fact that there are resources available for veterans.
Right.
And that if you ask early on in your intake process, if people are veterans, you can help them to get to those. We're actually part of a microloan process that's going on in the city of Chicago right now. This actually came through our mayor's office, and we are working with Axion, as you suggested. With the training program is a part of it, and what happens is that they can borrow from us up to $5,000 to buy materials and equipment. And where we found the most requests we've had in the past for this kind of money is through people who know how to do rehab work and things like that.
Right.
So they can rehab a bathroom, but they can't buy the tools that they need to do that work. And so while it's not going to start, the multi-million-dollar business that requires a high investment in assets, it can certainly help people who have a skill set that they can sort of do that work and make that money their own. And there are always going to be people who will do better in that environment working in the neighborhood in a 9-to-5.
Yeah, and just one really quick other point is that one of the things that we did is we realized that many of the businesses that are conducive to self-employment, plumbing, HVAC work, small business repair, are often those same training programs that are available in prison. But we also realized that there was no curriculum in those training programs in prison around self-employment. So we were teaching people how to be plumbers, but we then weren't teaching them how do you write invoices, right? So one of the things we've done is to work with our Department of Corrections in New York State to get them to try to introduce some of those elements into the training programs. So that might be something that you want to think about is, again, inventorying what kinds of training programs are available in your departments of corrections and are being offered to folks, and just looking at to see, are those the kinds of programs, occupations that are conducive to self-employment, and are we actually including the kind of elements that we need to? And there's lots of resources available in terms of, you know, again, many of these microenterprise programs would be very eager to work in the facilities and provide that kind of training.
I have a suggestion to make to everyone, is that one vehicle that we are looking to start doing so that we can improve the embracing of our returning citizens is that we're formulating work crews, as you indicated, but we're doing it in the form of rehab crews.
Yes.
That are
Yes.
supervised by retired master carpenters.
Yes.
And we will go and fix a banister, tighten some,
Yeah,
do
right.
some new steps, paint the steps, and we'll just ask that particular homeowner to make a donation.
Right.
And that this was being provided by, whatever name we come up with. But that's a good way to try to let them know that we're here to make an impact. We're not here to take from you. We want
Right.
to give to you.
Engender goodwill.
Well, and it's visible in the
Yeah.
community
Exactly.
and meaningful. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
fantastic.
That's a great suggestion. I just want, just one final note on the micro enterprise stuff is that SBA has a program that you can access as well. And in fact, I know they have encouraged us to become sort of a technical assistance provider with the micro enterprise environment, which would mean that we could actually do those kind of programs on our own without Axion or other people. We have not elected to do that at this point. I want to be careful. But just to let you know, there really is a lot available if we can just kind of dig far enough. But SBA is really good about it.
Yes.
One more question. What roadblocks are you running into, and I'm sure you are, in working with the sex offender population?
So working with the sex offender population.
We actually don't take, it's not all sex offenders, but sex offenders with an offense against a child, we actually don't enroll at CEO. I think it's extremely difficult because of the programming that most serious sex offenders are required to engage in when they come home, for them to really have a full-time job, but also, to be honest, it's harder to market to employers because we're very upfront about who it is that we're working with. So we do take some sex offenders, particularly probationers, who, it's a statutory rape or something like that, but against children we simply don't accept them, which is a shame, but that's been our policy, and parole's policy for us.
And our decisions actually vary by program based on what funders allow in a lot of cases. A lot of our programs, if they're federal programs, sort of dictate age groups, offenses, and those sorts of things. But by and large, anybody can walk through our doors and ask for help. And we are likely to be able to have some sort of program that can help them. But I would tell you, very few sex offenders come to us. It is significantly under 1% of the people that we serve. Not because we don't serve them, but they don't come to us. But it's kind of interesting because I think, when I think about our networks or the people who come to us, and I would think this is probably true for many, I think about it like in this pyramid format, right? So it's actually something above the pyramid and there's something below the pyramid, and we kind of sit in the pyramid. Above the pyramid, there are people who come home who have their own networks, who have their own access to support, their own access to jobs or to companies and those kinds of things, and they never come to see us. And there are also people who, if we stood on our heads 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, are not going to work. And so by and large, they don't come to see us. And so there are a lot of people that really just don't come to see us. The people who by and large come to see us are people who really think they're ready to go to work or want to go to work. They may recognize they're not ready yet, but they want to go to work ultimately, and they're sort of trying to look for the help that they can't get anyplace else to do that. I don't know if people with sex offenses just don't believe they can get that help. I really don't know how to answer why they don't come to us. I can only tell you that very few of them do.
Senator, we are being basically inundated with men and women coming out that have sex offenses, and
I think part of the issue for us is that they can't find housing. So before they can start to look for a job, they're looking for housing. Illinois in reaction to, Illinois, in reaction to a media event, decided that you cannot have more than one sex offender in a building. So if that building has 4,000 apartments, doesn't matter. One person per building. And so I suspect that one of the issues that they're facing coming home is where they're going to live, which is even more critical than any other issue they can face at that point in time. Unbelievable.
Did you have another question? Okay, so we're going to probably wrap up, but before we did, one of the things that we're going to try to do is a couple of webinars so that folks can continue to get some information related to helping folks get employment who have criminal records. And we just wanted to poll you as sort of a subgroup of the people who might take advantage of that of those webinars and your colleagues who might. What topics would be most helpful to you? And some of the ideas we had were, and we're hoping that you will vote on these, are, and I feel like from some of the questions that we fielded today, I think we may have an idea of which way we would go, but employer engagement, which would include something around labor forecasting, like how do you do some of the identification of which industries in your community are going to be growing over the next 5 or 10 years, and so that you know with your job development or your sector management staff how to recruit employers. Another topic might be, and we didn't really get at this today at all, but what are the legal rights and responsibilities of people who have criminal records in terms of getting jobs? Are there laws that you need to know in terms of what occupations they are barred from getting? Do they have rights to anti-discrimination protection that may make it illegal for an employer to discriminate against them based on an arrest record, for instance, as opposed to a conviction? Another topic might be is what's the role and how do you engage your local one-stop and other educational and training resources to help you as you're trying to move people. Both Mindy and Diane talked about the goal is certainly to get someone employed, but really how do we attach them and advance them in the labor market? So what is the role that some of those resources might play? And then finally, the last topic we identified was retention strategies and really identifying that retention begins at intake. It comes from how we do assessments, how we do placement, how we do appropriate job matching, and then what are some of the retention strategies that we should be focusing on to really make sure, again, that we yield success for our clients. So do any of those topics resonate more strongly for you? Are there additional topics that you feel like, gosh, if this was up, I just know that me and my entire staff would just sit at the computer for 90 minutes and listen?
Yeah, I like number 2, legal rights and responsibilities. What are the rights of the employer? One of the things that I'm looking at home is the collateral sanctions that's connected to what type of crime that you've been convicted of a felony. So exploring that aspect would be very beneficial. I think a webinar would be real nice on that. What is mandatory, what's not mandatory, what's discretionary, what's your employment rights, your civil rights, your political rights, or your property rights, all under that sanction section. That would be nice.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
I'm with the South Dakota DOC, and we also have the Incarcerated Individuals Program grant that helps the people who are 35 years and younger obtain some sort of a job skill. And we've been doing it for quite a few years, and that number 1 will also be helpful for just
Employer
that grant
engagement,
program.
yeah.
Because in South Dakota, we don't have much of, we don't have a lot of industrial work there, and I live in Pierre in the middle of the state where we have the women's prison, and then we have, Rapid City and Sioux Falls, which are hours away from each other, and so it's a big problem trying to get the females involved in something that's more important than just going to be a waitress, because they go back to what they know. So we're working on computer skills and stuff for the females, but I think number 1, it would almost be really important for us to say, how do we even forecast what's coming to South Dakota?
Great.
What's
Yeah,
out there?
Yeah. Any other strong ideas, additional ideas that we've not mentioned? Great. Well, we'll definitely look back at the questions you asked and make sure that we're responsive to your needs. Both Mindy and Diane, both of their organizations have really well-developed websites that offer a number of resources as well. Again, I mentioned the Hire Network. It's an employment clearinghouse for people with criminal records, so check that out. And, you know, this is the beginning of a conversation, and I hope that people within the room will also feel encouraged to network with one another and really that we think about this as a community moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.